Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of The Daily Objective. Today, I'm very fortunate to have Kirk Barbera co-hosting with me today on a very, very controversial topic, which was Jordan Peterson's tweet regarding Yumi Nu's earth-shattering Sports Illustrated cover. It was a very controversial tweet that went something like this. I'm not paraphrasing, I'm reading directly from the tweet. Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that. Well, of course, that's getting us objectivists very excited because it's making us think about standards of beauty. Should there be standards of beauty? Is beauty completely in the eye of the beholder? Or is there something objectively true that Peterson is saying here? Or is he just a jerk off, spouting off inappropriately on social media? We're going to try to sort all that stuff out here. But before we get to that, I want to make a quick announcement. At 7 p.m. UK time, we are starting the Fountainhead Book Club on the first chapter with Lisa Van Dam and Shoshana Milgram. So check that out. And without further delay, Kirk, I mean, I worked with you already on your Artful Tuesdays, the 8 Great Plays. We talked about about Ibsen and Enemy of the People, and that was very stimulating. So I fully expect that you have an encyclopedia of awesome to bring us with perspective. Not to put pressure on you.
Bring the power. Well, first I just want to say, you're introducing this, but my introduction is two equally beautiful men talk about beauty standards. And I think there's a lot that we could talk about with beauty standards and what Peterson is reacting to. And there's, so art, I think, has a lot to say about this. And I do want to bring up art. I have actually a statue to bring up to show to everybody at some point. And, what he is reacting to is this swimsuit model. Model. Think about what that word means, by the way, as the model for us to attain, right? That's kind of what he's thinking. That's what a model is, like a model house, a model person, a model anything. And, so that's what Swimsuit Edition has generally kind of been, is it has these models, which is what everyone tries to attain. And there's been this cultural stream for decades against these models of beauty. And, I was watching videos ahead of time for this show about, standard models of beauty are toxic, are evil, they're oppressive. Like, these kinds of ideas are very popular. These videos are getting millions of views. I heard them in high school. I heard them in college. I'm sure you heard them. I mean, have you ever heard the phrase or the view? Beauty standards of different cultures are different. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah.
So like if you go to Malaysia, if you go to Indonesia, they have their own standards of beauty. And if you go to Europe, they have their own standards. I mean, we've all heard that, and there's some truth to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a classic Twilight Zone episode based on the same thing called The Beholder.
Yeah. Is that the one? That's not the one with the pigs, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's the one with the pigs. Yeah.
For anybody who hasn't seen that episode, we've just given you a massive spoiler.
Yeah. So that's actually one that Ayn Rand wrote about. She loved that episode, and she thought of it as like the height of romanticism on television, basically, or one of the heights of romanticism on television. But so, I mean, we've heard this phrase, we've heard this idea that standards of beauty are subjective and they're in the eye of the beholder. Now, here's one interesting thing I've noticed in kind of looking at these expositions by these video essays and a few actual essays, is that they have the same basic logic that's extremely contradictory when we're talking about beauty standards, right? So I wrote down like a little syllogism. So it's, they'll talk about how all cultures have their own standards: Indonesia, Malaysia, China, and so on and so forth. Standards are subjective, right? So this is the eye of the beholder type thing. So that is the definition of subjectivism, is what I find beautiful is beautiful because I find it beautiful, right? And then, but here's the thing that they do where they twist it. European standards are evil. That's basically the conclusion they come to, because it encourages others to change to fit their standards. And they'll often ground it in racism and sexism. So they never talk about how in other cultures where they like lift up your neck to make your neck longer, or earlobes stretching, or lips stretching, or face painting,
binding feet, or binding hands, or binding heads.
Yeah, all these other cultural practices where you're trying to fit some ideal model, those they don't ever talk about as like evil or bad. It's only if white Europeans, is how they put it, white European or American standards are trying to make other cultures more like them. And by the way, often, and that's how they put it. I wouldn't put it that way. The people who are attacking this are putting it that way. To me, that's what I find the most interesting about the attacks on beauty, is that all cultures are equal, except European white cultures. They're evil and bad because everyone's trying to be like them.
Correct.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I think they see everything in terms of dominance and oppression, and they don't make any distinctions between people voluntarily adopting a standard that they prefer to their own culture and the imposition of a standard. I just talked to somebody on social media today who confuses persuasion with force and force with persuasion, and that's exactly what these folks do with respect to cultures. They've generally placed Western civilization in the dominance box, and now it can do no right, even if you choose that culture voluntarily. Its standards are oppressive, and when you look at it, I mean, it's because the standards aren't about necessarily accepting the status quo. They're progressive standards with respect to human growth and development, and that means you are, as a human being, the ideal in Western culture is to be the constantly improving being, right? Constantly innovating, constantly changing, constantly becoming, and people don't like that responsibility, I think, and so they'll vilify it rather than embrace it.
Yeah, and I think but I think there's two things here, right? So one is that cultures or ethnicities genetically do have slightly different within a certain framework, and this that we never talk about when it comes to standards of beauty, that there is a framework, right, of like what is essentially beautiful, but there's optionalities, but there's no definition of what they even mean by beauty other than it's subjective. So for instance, Ayn Rand made a really interesting statement about, she's basically echoing many other philosophers in this regard, is that beauty is about harmony among the parts, that there's a harmony. And so like she uses in a Q&A, she talks about, if you had a mishmash of features ethnically wise that aren't blended well, that it's not going to look as good. So that's one thing she actually kind of, I'm paraphrasing what she's saying now. And that's because, if you have like a certain ethnicity that has different eye shape, different nose shape, if you just plop that onto someone else's face, it may not look as good. Is what she's kind of arguing. And I think the point she's trying to make is not that you can't blend ethnically. I think that's like a mistake in terms of breeding and mating. But she's talking about like, if you just take like the standard European nose and put it on a standard African face, it's not going to work as well, right? It doesn't make as much sense because there's not as much harmony among all the parts. So she's saying there's a beauty to each within their own place. And yet she's still arguing for objective standards in beauty. And now, I mean, so I don't know if anybody's ever played games like video games where you create a character and you're kind of like you could actually create the facial structure. Have you ever played a game like that?
No.
It's like a role playing.
Minecraft does something like that, right?
Yeah, I think they do stuff like that, but like you can definitely play with different features. And it's interesting to see like what is, and you could do this, doesn't have to be.
When you're creating an avatar, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And they do it very minutely where you can like make the cheekbones go a little higher, a little lower. You could go to the inside and you can do a whole bunch of stuff. And you could see like you can mix and match for sure, but you have to create a harmony if you're going to make it beautiful. Otherwise it's distorted. And that's her view of like the objective standards of beauty, is that there has to be a kind of harmony among all the elements involved.
And that doesn't seem far off from the ancient Greek concept of beauty either.
Yes, I think that is the ancient Greek. Yeah, 100%. I mean, they thought
harmony, symmetry, that kind
symmetry.
of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they applied that to like history, literature, as well. Like they would want events to be symmetrical. Like this happened on 450 and this happened, parallel wise on like, across the planet at the same exact time in 450 BC or something like that. Even if it wasn't true, because they wanted it to be symmetrical and they loved everything harmoniously. So I think harmony is a really important way of looking at beauty, as beauty standards go. Now, here's the question that.
But let me ask you this question.
Please. Yes.
There are some cultures that I think some cultures in Asia that have music that's very discordant, I think, to the European ear. Now, how much of this concept of harmony is biological or culturally inputted, right? I mean, it seems to me that you would almost have an intuitive sense of harmony and what's symmetrical, right? It says it's perceptual, it's at the perceptual level. But these different kinds of music that would strike people in very different ways. How do you account for that?
I think that's an interesting question. The discordant question, in that particular music, I don't really have anything interesting to say about that because I don't understand it either, to be honest. I think because I've heard it, it definitely is striking in a weird, to me in my Western ear, in an odd way that doesn't have the universal. What I will counter with is the adoption in Asian cultures of Western sounding music once they heard it. Once they started hearing it, some grand masters came out of that culture and still come out of that culture. And I think, so I don't know like enough about what music and how it operates in our minds and what that might have done for them in their culture in the discordant era. I mean, I do know in some Asian literature, there is a kind of discordant element even to the literature. Like if you've watched movies that are Japanese movies or Asian movies, there will sometimes be like plot elements, although they don't even have a sense of plot sometimes, that just seems to come out of nowhere, right? Like I have no idea where this element is going or why it's there. And then it just kind of fades away and because that's how they kind of see life. And there's a question of how, how their worldview maybe impacts some of this that we as Westerners can learn in our interaction with different cultures. So I'm very pro learning from other cultures. And I think there's something that, what the West has provided for the rest of the world and for all of humanity is this idea of harmony, of logic, of reason that I think is acceptable or is an important value to consider. And I think it's the value that humans need to flourish.
Yep.
But that's a good question. And I think a musician would probably have a really interesting answer. Music is not as much my forte as the visual and literary arts. But I've heard that one before. I mean, do you have a thought on that?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's a tough one.
Other than our ears may be trained to what we hear and, to what we experience.
Yeah. Well, so you're saying like there is some subjectivity. And I think that is, so bringing it back to visual arts or like romantic, or, sexual and some people, I think when I read the comments for the swimsuit edition, that swimsuit issue that Jordan Peterson is talking about is they're kind of confusing certain things about like an ideal model versus like you find this woman attractive. Mm-hmm. For a dating. And I think people do confuse that. So a lot of people will say, Jordan, open your eyes. She's very beautiful. I would date her anytime. She can come over anytime. And it's like, okay. I don't think that's what he was saying. There's nothing in there that he says about this authoritarian standards of beauty being challenged, where he says you can't date someone who doesn't fit the ideal model. In fact, to some degree, nobody fits the ideal model. That's the point of a model. Is it's the standard that we're all striving to achieve on some level. And so I think another question about standards is, in what way are they oppressive to people? And or are they good or bad? And can they be oppressive to people to have a standard that you're trying to achieve?
Oh, I think I don't consider oppression not being able to meet up to a standard. I consider oppression somebody forcing you to do something that you'd rather not. And so you have complete control over your body and complete free choice. But if somebody's provided a standard, or a culture provides a standard that's very high and it's impossible for you to reach it, I think if you call it oppressive, you just lack perspective, your own personal perspective and or autonomy, right? You're just not taking responsibility for the fact that, I can't attain this objective. It's still something I hold to be an ideal. I may not be able to attain it, but I'm going to strive and make the striving the ideal for me, make that the good for me, as opposed to focusing on my inability to attain it. You understand? And
oh yeah.
That's not oppression, that you can't attain an ideal.
I mean, that's basically my view as well. Like when I was, in researching this stuff, the argument people make against these kind of body standards and body shaming is that it causes in young women lots of dysmorphia, mental issues, eating disorders, and a variety of other problems, right? So they show in all these videos, actually, not some of them, all of them, they literally interview young girls and say, and sometimes young boys, but almost always young girls, like, is this beautiful? Are you beautiful? They have all these videos of young, very sad videos of like a 2 or 3 year old little black girl saying she doesn't think she's beautiful, right? Because she has dark skin. She has a doll that's white, and they give girls 2 dolls, one that's white, one that's black, and a black girl chooses the white doll as the beautiful doll, right? And it's heartbreaking to see. And I think that's, there is truth to that. And that's one of the important things that we should be, that the left is advocating, that's important to think about, is there are these damages challenges in having an integrated, complex society like America. Whereas if you're in, like if I move to China, I'm not going to try to, convince them to have non-Asian dolls there to make me and my kids feel better. I'm going to just have to kind of adopt what they have because they're the vast majority. But we have a much more mixed, complex society that in terms of ethnicities that we need to kind of, and this is an issue that pops up. And another one, places where this happens, I think it's an issue that pops up.
So what exactly do you do about that? Because that is a real problem. But what's the cause? Is the standard the cause, or is something else the cause?
Yeah. So, I think, so my view is that the cause is an improper understanding of how to educate children, because you're going to be confronted with a variety of values and different ways of organizing your life. And what I think we need to be helping kids with is figuring out how to think through these issues to attain their own deepest values and what they think is most interesting and exciting for themselves and their own future. So some people are going to value things a little bit differently. Maybe some people are readers and they stay at home more often and they're not super active. So they're not going to, if you're like that and you also value, the super energetic, fit swimsuit model, old school swimsuit model type of superstar athlete female, that's going to be hard. That's not impossible, but that's a difficult value. You might need to go out and change your values a little bit if that's something that you really want. Like if you want to date a dancer and you hate dancing, that could be a challenge sometimes. And there's these values. I think there's these values we have. There's an infinite amount. We have to help young people make decisions about those values and how to figure them out for themselves. And that's one issue, rather than try to fix society. That's my point. So what we're trying to do is like fix society and say like, this is evil because these magazines, these TV commercials, these movies and TV stars are all, impossible to meet. So let's fatten them up. Let's forget about beauty standards and let's just all feel good about ourselves, versus having those standards and then understanding how to make decisions or learning how to think, in other words, to pursue your own values the way that you want to within the context of that world.
And so teaching kids to put emotions before their minds and treat their emotions as sort of the ideal cognitive tools in their lives is probably not helping matters much at all.
Well, yeah, I think like it's so like if you're dealing with a kid who has that issue where they think this is ugly and that's beautiful, I think that is something to grow from and to take that as like an opportunity to teach them about beauty and what beauty is and how to look at it. And like, let's look at artworks and ideals from different cultures and different ideas. What value does this have versus what value does that have and why? And like, that's an opportunity to teach a child versus what I see on the left is like, you feel this certain way. That's the ultimate standard. You're feeling like that's what you're saying, I think. And I agree. That is majorly problematic. We need to teach them how to use their feelings as motivation to learn more about these types of things and to explore the world rather than saying that that's the standard, like what I feel is ultimate and everyone has to adjust to my feelings. It's like, no, that's nonsense.
What about something like this swimsuit issue actually making, suddenly making a goal within reach that might not have been in reach to someone previously? So somebody who is a plus size, good looking woman might not have even considered the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated to be a worthy goal to shoot for, but now she can. And what do you say about that doing something rather good for her self-esteem, right? What do you, I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like there's been a revisionist historical movement that took the founding fathers off their pedestals and exposed all their shortcomings to us. There they are in the background right there. Now, for me, it didn't make them less giant. In some respects, it made them, I think the intention was to diminish them, but it made them greater to me because I saw how they were able to overcome their own times and rise above them in many ways. And that is a teaching tool for me, but it also made them very accessible. I saw them no longer, it wasn't George Washington. It wasn't Carson Moon's version of George Washington. It was the real George Washington, you know? And that's something I can do. And this Sports Illustrated model, that's something I can do, right? And so that could pull people up who might have been discouraged before.
Well, I don't know if you agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't know if you're saying that as like an idea.
I'm devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate. Yeah, like because I'm gonna have to contradict. I don't think that's accurate. I think, you know, like if we have the lowest of low standards, then that's the highest we're ever going to achieve.
Right.
And so having higher and higher standards is about achieving higher and higher things.
Right.
And I don't even accept the psychological conclusion. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but I don't accept the psychological conclusion yet that having these standards makes most women feel bad most of the time. I think it actually makes many women feel good some of the times. And we don't ever talk about any of the women that feel great about when they see them, you know, something in the model and they take out a new diet regime and they go after it. I mean, we only focus on the absolutely unhealthy aspects of it. Not like, oh, like how many millions of women, you know, lost some weight and like went to the gym. It's like, and they felt a little bit better about themselves. That's good. That's a really good thing. You know I don't look like it, but I go to the gym. And the reason I started going to the gym 10 years ago, and I go 5 days a week, and I started because of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Pumping Iron. I knew I was never, ever going to look like freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger in Pumping Iron. There's no way. Even when I dieted the most, you know, I was going to the gym 5-6 days a week. Like, I just knew it wasn't going to do it. I mean, one, I wasn't going to take steroids, but you know, there's I just knew that wasn't going to happen, but it drove me to the gym because I thought it was really interesting and fun to try to build my body like a sculpture, which is what he talks about at a point in that movie. And I thought that was cool. And it made me get off my ass literally and go to the gym. And I've gone to the gym almost every day for 10 years. I've never missed a time. And I love it. And I think, like, to me, that's what standards have. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was an impossible standard. I would never have achieved his standards unless I, you know, quit everything and dedicated my entire life to it. And even then, It's hard to believe. And that's what it is. And if he was like, if he looked like me now, then I would look like, like if I was the standard, and then that's what I like looked up to, I would be like a flat, fat blob of nothing, right? I never would have been motivated to get off my ass.
Right. I mean, I think the great thing about a standard is it forces you to reach up. You don't reach.
That's it.
Standards. Yeah. You don't reach laterally to standards. You reach up to standards. And
that I think is what Jordan Peterson is reacting to. And what people are confusing when I read the comments, including some of the comments in our chat, which we have some super chats. I'll try to read them. Thank you everybody for the robust conversation. But one of the things I think people confuse is, what I would even form is objective beauty standards or almost artistic ideals versus sexual attractiveness. And there's a lot of art that pretty much all art that I could find very beautiful, but I'm not going to have sex with art. And I think that is something that seems confusing to people. And it's like, like we hold movie stars and TV stars attractively to a different standard than we do in our day-to-day life, right? Like there's when I'm judging Scarlett Johansson, I'm judging her in relation to all the other ideals of movie stars, not to the girl who I'm interacting with at Starbucks, who I might actually date. And I think we do. And she's that's not to say that the girl that I'm actually going to date is not beautiful, but it's just to say that our standards are a little bit different. And I understand, because I'm not stupid. Scarlett Johansson doesn't even look like that, right? Like that is Scarlett Johansson with a, you could tell I have a crush on Scarlett Johansson, I guess. That is Scarlett Johansson with like, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on her beauty and looking a certain way. So so we have some super chats. We have a lot of super chats. Yeah. Do you want to read a couple of them?
Yeah, sure. This is from Roland for €4.99. Preferences vary. I'd take that lady over a skinny chick any day. There you go. So that's
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Again, talking about who you'd have a relationship with, and ideal standards of beauty are different. Yeah. Mary Aline, $5. No comment, just the $5. Thank you, Mary Aline. Robert with $5 says, should we feel sympathy for Jordan Peterson? After all, he looks like a JBP, and he says things like this, poor unfortunate soul. Yeah, he did get a lot of comments, by the way, where people were posting pictures of him and saying, definitely not beautiful. and say, sort of reflecting his comment back at him. What do you say about that? Should we have?
Well, I mean, again, that people are not. I think why he quit Twitter, by the way, is because people are not engaging with his question at all. His question is about the ideal model we should be striving for, not do you find particular individuals attractive for dating? And right. I think people don't understand the difference. And they therefore get mad at him when he accuses someone, this magazine, who has always presented as a swimsuit model that we could strive for. And he's saying that's not beautiful. And no matter how much your authoritarianism makes you want to enforce this standards, it's not what we should be striving for.
Probably should have worded it differently then.
Maybe.
Yeah. If he's making a comment about standards of beauty that rise to the level of artistic standards that we strive for but may not necessarily be able to attain, and or attractive people that we could date and want to date, then he should have probably made that distinction a little bit more clearly so people could understand. I think he was trying to do it in the comment section when he was talking about how some intellectual activists are trying to change standards of beauty, and that is in itself a very damaging thing for them to do, and he wouldn't be wrong in that respect, but definitely could have worded this differently. What say you with respect to that?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he could have worded it, but I also think people could like stop and think and question what he's actually trying to say, and instead of trying to come up with the cutest meme to make people laugh, or the cutest quirky, witty thing to say that has nothing to do with what he's saying, and try to make people laugh.
Or to jump on the I hate Jordan Peterson bandwagon.
Yeah, or to jump on that bandwagon once it starts.
Uniquely equipped to
do that. Yeah, exactly.
Here's $5 from Mary Elaine. Thank you. Robert Peterson wouldn't be bad looking if he got that awful lugubrious look off his face. Boy, is beautiful. That's true. He's a dark soul.
He's very dark. Yeah,
for real. He's a dark soul, and we saw him at one of the Ocons when he sort of debated Iran and Greg Salamarian. I thought he was very appealing up there on stage, but he certainly has elements to his being that are dark.
It's very dark, and that matters.
Yeah, and that matters, and that's not it's not good equipment to handle what's going to come at him on Twitter when he makes a comment this sweeping.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
Robert gives us another $5. The morning after, when this has been forgotten, Yumi will still have that body, and Jordan will still have the kind of soul which made that statement. What do you say to that? That's a pretty intense thing for Robert to say. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah. So, I saw Midsummer's Night stream in Shakespeare in the Park just recently. And Chikalala is putting that on here in Austin. And I haven't read that in a long time. I reread it to get ready for the play. And there's the line, love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. Therefore, is Cupid painted blind? And, love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. Now, that's not to say that people can't be beautiful, but in the play, by the way it's traditionally acted is you have the two main characters, male characters, who are supposed to be basically identical. And they're both going after the same woman, essentially. And Demetrius and I'm forgetting the guy's, Lysander. And they're both going after, I think, Hermia, and one of them, another girl, Hermia's friend, loves Demetrius. And, anyway, but there's supposed to be a lot of symmetry in how the people look together. And the only thing you can kind of come up with is that the reason they love each other is just kind of this arbitrary thing of something about their character that we have to try to glean through the play, right? And I think character has a lot to say about beauty, a lot. That now, again, we have to separate that from visual beauty of a magazine cover, because that's not presented at all. It's only the physical standards, and that's the issue. But yeah, I mean, I could totally see myself marrying a woman like this. Like if she was a wonderful person, and if she's the type of person that, like me, likes to be active and go to the gym and work out, then yeah. Now, if she sits on her butt, no, I'm not going to be interested. Like if she's lazy, no, I'm not going to be. So what they're saying here is about Jordan Peterson's soul is that the soul is a beautiful thing, or can be a beautiful thing, and it can be something that you are or are not attracted to based on certain individual values that you have. And I recommend everyone read a poem and study a poem called She Walks in Beauty by Lord Byron, which is about this, which is about the harmonious beauty of a woman that he sees and how her inner joy manifests in her external world. And she kind of brings, you've met a woman who may not be like the world-changing beauty that would end up on a swimsuit model, but when she walks into a room, it lights up. Right? Like other people light up around her. She's a joy to be around. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's great.
Let's not forget that that's probably the way Cleopatra was. And she wasn't supposed to be a conventional beauty, but spoke many languages and was a wit and
she charmed.
Had a light that attracted men of great power to her. And that is a dimension of beauty that isn't considered in the tweet, and that can make or break physical beauty, right? I mean, we were talking earlier about Amber Heard being conventionally beautiful, but
very beautiful,
hideously ugly in enough ways to detract entirely from her physical presence, whatever that may be.
Yeah. You could put her on a swimsuit model and she would look great. And we would have no problem with her as an ideal physical model. But then if she walked into a room, you would hate her and never want to talk to her, never want to sleep with her.
Exactly. And there's something to be said for that. Allie Beard with $5 says, I have no pity for Peterson. He knows what he's doing and doesn't know when to quit. His attitude towards many subjects is unsurprising. Strange to me, she says. What do you think of that, Kirk?
Well, I mean, like I said in the past on this show, I think I believe in the role of ideals in our lives, and they're critical. So I agree with Peterson in his defense of trying to have ideals, whatever those ideals may be. Now, if your ideals are this new ideal of an overweight woman as the ideal standard of beauty, you can make that argument as that that's a value. And that's something we can, the question is what underlying value is there in the overweightness of someone? And so someone could argue she's not overweight, she's healthy. And that I think is an interesting conversation to have. Maybe you can make that, it's not like she's obese. This woman is not obese. I think that's what, like if she was another even 25 pounds, then that might be clear that she's very obese. She's just a bigger woman in a sense, right? So I think like that's what makes it very complicated is what underlying value are you representing? So for instance, if you want to represent the active lifestyle, you're going to represent someone a little bit more toned and skinny. Like if that's important to you. If you want to represent someone who's, lounging around doing nothing most of the day, and maybe leisure is what you might want to represent someone who's a little bit bigger, who's just kind of sitting around eating. Although again, that kind of, to me, connotes the kind of just gorging self.
That doesn't connote a conscious life to me, right?
Exactly.
That's a minimal existence. And that's part of the reason why we can say that there's certain assumptions we make about people who meet up to this quote unquote standard of physical beauty, is that there's something about the way they are approaching life that has a very conscientious approach to their physical well-being, and it sort of translates, right? Regina with two euros says, pair character turning around, waving his hand, saying, "Hey, you," while lowering his glasses.
I don't understand.
I don't understand that either, but thank you.
Sorry, Regina.
Maybe you can give us a translation later on. Enric Teller with $4.99 says, an error is something assigning intrinsic qualities to concretized ideals in models, actors et al. Assigning intrinsic qualities to concretized ideals in models, actors et al. You want to translate that one for me?
Error is some assigning intrinsic qualities to concretized. Some assigning intrinsic qualities to concretized ideals. I mean, there's something about that's striking me as correct. Assigning intrinsic qualities to concretized ideals. So if he's saying like
you can't say something is good because it's symmetrical or harmonious or something like that. Is that what you're saying, Henrik?
That's what it sounds like to me. I mean,
how they used to in the old days, when Hamlet and Ophelia have the conversation in Act 3, Scene 4 about beauty in combination with beauty and goodness were thought to be were thought to be together. Virtue and beauty were thought to accompany one another, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're if we're gonna say like someone looks, I don't know, intelligent is a value. And we're gonna associate that with like glasses or something like that, right? Like if you wear glasses, you're definitely intelligent.
Khmer Rouge thought that. They killed a lot of people with glasses.
Yeah, and I think that is that. If that's what Enric is saying, I agree. That's a problem. You shouldn't, associate concretes or these fundamental values with a specific concrete necessarily. That being said, some concretes can artistically represent certain aspects of our views, right? So that there is something to that idea of like, again, so I'm going to show you something that I was going to point out earlier. This is a Cro-Magnon man sculpture. Can you guys see this?
You know what? I think somebody posted this as on Jordan Peterson's Twitter. I want to say I've seen this.
Yeah, so this is...
I didn't even know Cro-Magnon men did art.
Well, yeah, and so this comes from Sandra Shaw's Windows on Humanity. Or this is where I learned about this, and I did a show with her. And she goes all the way back. And, so part of what she's doing is like excavating values from cultures based on the little bits of things that they have. And I think that's Jordan Peterson's perspective of a little bit is like, if we're to go 10,000 years in the future, 30,000 years in the future, and kind of excavate our deepest values as a culture, what are we saying to ourselves and to the future in a sense? And one of the things that people, I think, misunderstand about the idea that I've heard a lot, and that you probably have heard, is that different cultures have different standards of like weight, for instance. And like in the past, men were attracted to heavy set women. And that is not 100% accurate. That's not an actual way to look at it. Even looking at this standard, I think people are misunderstanding the underlying value that was had. And so what Sandra and I talked about was these people 30,000 years ago were living on hand to mouth most of the time. They can observe, and this is where values come from if you're, objectivist, and where they should come from is observation. They observed that skinny women, as these nomadic tribes are moving around trying to survive, skinny women gave birth to unhealthy babies that often died more often. If the tribe was doing well and they could have a woman sit down and, just eat and then give birth, she gave birth more often to healthy babies. So this is not about sexual desire of the sense of loving a person for the person. This is about fecundity. This is about like, I see this woman as capable of giving birth to more people. That's what I value as a culture back then, not the fatness, the fecundity. And so if you think about like, well, what does it say that we're trying to like make more and more women, these bigger sense, like what is the underlying value? Honestly, I think the underlying value today is more just irrational acceptance of who you are versus who you could be. That's how I would think of it. And there's all these different values, so there's this underlying thing of, in terms of these standards, that they don't allow us to accept who we are. So the question, should we accept ourselves as we are? No, that's my answer. We should try to be better always till the day you die. That's it. Until the day you die, you should be growing. That's what I've learned from Ayn Rand. And I agree with that. Intellectually, spiritually, physically. Yes, you're going to change. Yes, there's certain parameters. I'm never going to be as big and beautiful as Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was winning Mr. Olympia. It's never going to happen. I'm still going to strive for it. I love it. I'm going to fight for it. And that's my point. You should not accept who you are. That's the message. That's the underlying value.
Now that's going to fall on some. It's going to fall harshly on a few ears, and I can see why. As much as I agree with this principle myself, I think you're either improving or you're going backwards. There's really no stasis in life, right? It's moving forward or you're deteriorating, and I would prefer to move forward than deteriorate. But there is an element, I think, which encompasses the art of living, which is still allowing for who you are and liking and accepting who you are, and even though it's in process. So that's not a form of, I'm just going to accept whatever I am and whoever I am without improvement, but you do have to live with yourself, right? You do have to, there has to be an embrace of what you are in the here and now at the same time that you are improving. And how do you walk that tightrope?
I think that is the deep question. We're kind of running out of time. So I think it's hard to get into all of it. I'll just say that I have always prided myself in going after self-help books. I love Benjamin Franklin as a model for this because he's famously had a virtue journal where he would actually have specific traits he wanted to have, and he would track it every single day. I overate today. I lied today, or I, didn't tell the full truth today. I spoke too much. I don't remember he had all these virtues and he tracked it every day. And, does that mean he didn't accept himself? No, I think he accepted himself as someone who's striving to be good. I think pride isn't accepting who you are as like this being that's somehow been made by reality, culture, God. You are a self-made man or woman. And so you should take pride in, like, I am who I am because I conscientiously went out and worked toward it. That's what I'm proud of. And that's what I accept about myself. And I make flaws, and I have flaws, and I think about how can I change those flaws. But like, people think I'm extroverted. I'm super shy, and I was always shy. When I was 18, decided I'm going to do 100% commission sales jobs because I want to learn how to force myself to be more outgoing. And I'd set out these traits that I want to learn. So my point is, no, you should not accept who you are in the sense of accepting your negative traits that you know are negative about yourself. You should know know thyself, and then try to strive for something better.
Yeah, but you should be cognizant of the fact that you're in process and always changing, and that I think will help you deal with where you are in the moment, even though you're striving to be something better all the time. Mary Aline with $2 says fertility goddess.
We think so.
You were right. Yeah. Robert says, should you ever love and accept yourself as you are? And you answered that as in no, but I would add to that, and I think you would agree that you can understand you're being in constant process, and so that you don't get in the warfare with yourself of beating yourself up, denigrating yourself. Yeah. You take pride in the fact that you are constantly evolving and actively changing as a human being.
Yeah, you have to, this will be the last thing, you have to know the difference between the metaphysically given and the man-made. Ayn Rand wrote a great article, and that applies to your soul, that I'm never going to be 7 foot tall and play in the NBA. There's certain limits. I'm never going to be a certain kind of beauty, but within the limits of my abilities, so I can accept that, but within the limits I can improve. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for. Concluding thoughts and final saying to Mark. Yeah.
Oh no, maybe you should, because I think you brought the nice poem and everything. I think you have a great way to sum this up, and I'll just say the final announcement.
Well, I mean, to me, that's the summing it up, is the metaphysical versus the man-made is a complex thing. And this applies not only to the external world, but to your internal world. And so I do think, like, there's certain traits that some people are just more productive, for instance, and there's a limit, and you shouldn't kill yourself literally trying to be as productive. However, you should improve your productivity. You both can be equally the same. Same thing with body shaming. Like, there's certain limits to my body. I work out a lot, and it's hard, man. Like, doing certain things for me is really, really challenging. But so I accept who I am, and I still try to be better. And I think of ways to be better. And that, I think, both are true. And that's my final statement.
Absolutely. And I think that's the art of living. And I think Jordan missed it a little bit in complaining about a real thing that's happening, which is a culture that's attempting to undermine standards of beauty and replace them with something else. He ended up being a little bit problematic. Bonnie Bertrand with $2 says, so many good points from both hosts. Must re-listen. Thank you, Bonnie, for your contribution. Now, upcoming shows, 7 p.m. UK time. We're starting the Fountainhead Book Club on the first chapter with Lisa Van Dam and Shoshana Milgram. 9 p.m. UK time with James Valiant. We'll be discussing Ayn Rand's The Intellectual Bankruptcy of Our Age.
Awesome.
In full evidence on Twitter every day of the week, folks. Look, it's been a joy for me to talk to you again, Kirk.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Awesome. I really think you shed a lot of great light on a very controversial topic. I thought it was going to be way more controversial, but it turns out objectivists have the right take on this, as they have on so many other things. But thanks for co-hosting with me. It's been awesome. This has been the Daily Objective, brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, and we will see you later.